My name is Neil Butler and I am the National Official for Wales for the NASUWT. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation with you, and then I'll work through that, and then if anyone has got any questions at the end of the presentation, if you want to put them into the chat, and I'll answer them as best as I can. So just bear with me a second. I'm just going to share my screen. Right, okay. I hope that you can see that. I've got the chat box up as well. Could you confirm that you can you see the presentation? Can you see that? Okay, brilliant. Okay, lovely. Thank you. I'll make a start on this then. What I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about NQT induction in Wales, rights, responsibilities, and give you some information with regards to that, because it is significantly different from England. So let's just work through this. Okay. Right, first thing is to make sure that you're on school teachers' pay and conditions. Now, that's not as daft a question as it might sound, because some private schools don't have teachers' pay and conditions, and it's unlikely that you would be able to achieve qualified teacher status at a private school if they don't follow teachers' pay and conditions. So I'm going to go ahead with this on the assumption that it's the school that you will be at will be following teachers' pay and conditions, the agreed pay and conditions, and is not a private institution. It doesn't mean, by the way, that you can't attain QTS in a private school. You can do, but it depends upon the school. So if you are going to work in a private school, you would need to check that. Right, okay, let's start with the most important thing. Pay. Well, it's not the most important thing, but some people might, it is pretty important, I think. In Wales, the pay scale works out like this. There is one slight difference from England. When you go into teaching, and this will be true in your NQT year, you go straight onto the main pay scale. In England, it's a main pay range, because it can be different within the two ranges, the minimum and the maximum. But in Wales, it's a pay scale, it's a set scale. After you've done 5 years of teaching in Wales, you can go on to the upper pay scale. Those teachers who do not attain QTS, have not got QTS, are on an unqualified teacher scale. But in Wales, you can only be an unqualified teacher for a short period of time, after which you are expected to attain qualified teacher status. There is also the option of leading practitioner range in Wales, but there are very, very few leading practitioners that exist in Wales. If you move on to leadership, some years ahead, if you have ambitions in that direction, you would go on to a separate leadership scale. And school leaders also have separate conditions of service as well. Now, in Wales, only recently, pay progression has been separated from performance. So pay is not linked to performance as it is in England. There is one exception to this, and that is the move in Wales between the main scale and the upper pay scale. You have to apply to go onto the upper pay scale, and that is still assessed in Wales through performance. But all other progressions are not, they are automatic. Now, if you're on the main pay scale and you accept extra responsibilities, such as a head of department or a head of year or something like that, you would be awarded a TLR. TLR, teaching and leadership pay, that is, and that would be dependent upon the level of responsibility, and there are different levels with regards to TLRs. Now, moving on from pay, then this is what the pay is likely to be. However, what you're looking at there actually is the English pay scale. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, is it the same in Wales? Well, actually, no, it isn't. And it might come as a pleasant surprise to you to find that actually in Wales, you are paid slightly more at the moment. It's only slightly more, and that's because the pay award in Wales, there was a pay award in Wales this year, but pay has been frozen in England. So the pay is slightly more in Wales. You'll notice there you've got the minima, M1, 25,714, that's on September 2020, but as I said, there's been a pay freeze in England, and the maximum there, 41,604. Well, if you look at what it is in Wales, it's for this year, it's going to be 27,490 on the minimum M1 as you go in to teaching, and the maximum you would get on the maximum upper pay scale UPS3 is 42,333. But remember, you don't automatically go onto the upper pay scale. You have to apply for the upper pay scale. Usually after 5 years of teaching, although actually you can apply sooner, but that's likely to change. Right, what about teachers' conditions of service? Now I'm going to come on to NQTs and special considerations for NQTs. Later on, but just a few things with regards to basic teachers' conditions of service. Now, teachers' conditions of service are written down in two books, basically, and we call them the Blue Book and the Burgundy Book. Now, it's a little bit confusing, so because we call them the Blue Book in Wales, but they also call it the Blue Book in England, and they're slightly different. The long name is a bit of a tongue twister, though. It's the School Teachers Pay and Conditions Wales document. So we like to just call it the Blue Book, but it is slightly different from England. And each year, because the Welsh Education Service has now pretty well separated off from the English service, they're going in different directions, and each year it gets more different. But some basics with regards to conditions of service. Well, your working days are set down in what's called a directed time budget. School teachers have to work 195 days in a year, and the working limit ceiling is 1265 hours in that year. That's not a target for schools to achieve, that's the ceiling, that's the limit. And in your working time, you would have lunch breaks which are unpaid, and you would therefore not be expected, or you should not be expected to work during those lunch breaks, weekends obviously, and bank holidays. But what you also get is what's called PPA time, and PPA time is 10% of your timetabled teaching time. So whatever you are timetabled to do, you have to have 10% of that for planning, preparation and assessment. That's what the PPA stands for. And that has to be for planning, preparation and assessment, and should not be being used by the schools for meetings or requiring you to do other things. That space was created within the school day, so you can actually do that work during the school day. However, do remember that teachers are expected to do planning, preparation and assessment outside directed time as well, evenings, weekend, whatever is appropriate depending upon the work. Cover, when teachers are absent for whatever reason, they need to be covered for. However, it is not a teacher's job to cover under normal circumstances. It has to be under exceptional circumstances that teachers can be asked to cover, and schools should have in place cover assistants, support workers who can do that cover when it's required in the school. You're also not required to do administrative tasks either. Teachers are not employed to do administrative tasks. This is a distraction from the core task of teaching, which is what you are meant to be concentrating on. So watch out for that as well in your schools. Notice periods in terms of ending employment. This is that's what's in the Burgundy book. That is, you have to give 2 months notice in the first term if you want to leave by Christmas, 2 months notice if you want to leave by Easter, but 3 months notice if you wanted to leave at the end of the academic year. And that's different, obviously, from other forms of employment. And whilst you will be paid monthly, it will be looked upon as a breach of contract if you left and only gave a month's notice. So be careful of that as well. But let's hope that's not going to be the case for you. You're starting out in your teaching careers, and I hope and trust you would not be thinking of ending them at this time. That sick pay, once you've done a period of time in the teaching profession, the sick pay, also written there in the Burgundy book, is for 100 days full pay, 100 days half pay. But be careful of that though, because even though that does sound quite generous in terms of what your sick pay entitlement is as a teacher, lots of schools now have absence management policies that can be quite punitive with regards to teacher absence. So just be careful of that one. But look, let's go on to what you're about as an NQT. What are your specific rights as a newly qualified teacher going into teaching in Wales? Well, again, there's some different things here from England. There are some things that are the same, but some that are different. The one that is different from the start is that the reduction in timetable teaching time is 20% going into schools in Wales, but that includes that 10% PPA. And unlike England, there's no extra reduction in the second year. You are not expected to teach outside the age range or subject for which you have been trained. If once you get QTS, once you get qualified teacher status, that is not the case. You're qualified as a teacher and you can be asked to teach outside the subject for which you have been trained. But obviously, you know, you'd need, if it was something that was well outside your comfort zone, you would need appropriate training for that, but you can be asked to do that, but not as an NQT. You must have access to planning procedures used by other teachers. That's part of the help and support programme, and you will have support from a mentor in the school that you go into. You cannot be expected to routinely teach classes or individual children with particularly challenging discipline problems. I'm afraid that was very much the case when I started teaching many, many years ago. When I was a teacher, it was almost like a rite of passage that you would be given some of the most difficult classes and most difficult children just to see if you could cope with them. Thankfully, those days should be behind us. You should be teaching the same classes on a regular basis, and during your first year, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit, you should have a comprehensive programme of support during your first year of teaching. If things are going wrong during your NQT time, you should also receive any early warning of any perceived problems and difficulties. What should not happen is you get to, say, the end of your year where you're expecting to move into qualified teacher status, and it suddenly be dropped on you that there are problems. and issues. They need to tell you very early on if there are problems and issues, so that it gives you an opportunity to sort out those problems and issues. The induction tutor and the induction mentor roles are separated wherever possible. I'm looking at that now thinking, well, maybe I should have picked up on this when I checked this PowerPoint, but I'm not entirely sure that's true in Wales. In Wales, you get an induction mentor in the school that you go to, and there may be an induction tutor would be something that would be supplied by the local authority. But I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure about that. I would have to check on that for Wales. Pay progression starts as soon as you start teaching in your first year. You're on M1 in that year, and as I said before, because it's not tied to performance, you should automatically move up the scale through each year of teaching that you go into. Now, the key points for NQTs going in through COVID-19. Well, one obvious thing, of course, that's changed for everybody, and indeed is the reason I'm doing this through this media rather than in a live meeting, is COVID-19 and what's happened with regards to COVID-19. Now, in Wales, the situation with regards to COVID-19 is that there are still some mitigations in the wider society, but by and large, many mitigations against COVID-19 have been now removed from schools. You will find, for example, that in your classroom, the learners are no longer going to be required to wear face coverings in the classroom, and COVID-19 is going to be dealt with on a much more local basis in Wales, and the Welsh government have put into place a graduated response that local authorities and schools can use depending upon the specific COVID-19 situation in the locality and in the school. So one of the first things you're going to have to do when you go to your new schools is find out what the situation is in your school. And what rules are in place, what procedures are in place to ensure that they're stopping the spread of COVID-19. There's twice weekly tests available for staff in both primary and secondaries, and for the learners also in secondary schools. But you will be part of that team of teachers who are responsible for not just protecting yourself, but also trying to protect the learners from the spread of COVID. And so to be aware of obviously the symptoms and the requirements to stop the spread of COVID, and to report any suspected individuals of having the virus so that they can be dealt with. But from now on, it's going to be on a much more local basis. So when you go to schools from September in Wales, there may be different requirements in different schools. So look out for that, but you should be made clearly aware of that by your induction member and indeed by the head teacher of the school that you will be going to. Right, welcome to Wales. If you're going to be teaching in Wales, it may well be that you've done your teacher training in Wales. If you've not done your training in Wales, then you would have to go through what's called the Education Workforce Council to be able to assess whether the qualifications, the work that you've done as a student is appropriate to do your NQT year in Wales. A few bits and pieces about that, about teaching in Wales. Remember what I said, it is different now from England. I've got down there at the bottom of that list there, except the pensions, also except health and safety legislation as well. But apart from those two things, really, pretty well everything else is moving in a totally different direction from England. just under 27,000 teachers in Wales, 13,328 in primary, 11,171 in secondary. 3/4 of the workforce are female. That's a greater proportion in primary than secondary. Pay, as I've shown you, is slightly higher than in England. That's only just this year that that's been the case. Certainly I wouldn't expect that, although I can't tell the future, you're not going to find that it's going to, I think, diverge massively from England, but it is welcome to see that it is slightly higher at the moment. There are 22 local authorities, which is an enormous number of local authorities actually for the population of Wales, but it's a real political hot potato in Wales, so it maintains its 22 local authorities, even though some of them are extremely small. And one of the ways of getting around that the Welsh Government did was it created what are called these regional consortia, and there were 4 regional consortia in Wales. There are 2 in the southeast, one that covers mid and the southwest, and one that covers the north. The regional consortia are supposed to be responsible for standards, and they're supposed to give help, support, and challenge, if you like, to schools in their particular consortia areas. What you also have in Wales, which you do not have in England, is the Education Workforce Council, and you have to be a member of the Education Workforce Council. Now, it's actually quite important for you as an NQT anyway, because they have a big role to play for newly qualified teachers, which I'll come on to in a second. But even after you've got qualified teacher status, you have to maintain your membership of the EWC, which I'm afraid you do have to pay for. Now, there are all kinds of niggles and problems that we in the NASUWT have with the EWC, but I won't go into those now. All you need to know is that you have to join, and also that they do have a key role to play for you as an NQT. Now, what about the impact of COVID-19 on induction this year? Now, obviously, C-19 has had a huge impact on schools. It's had a huge impact on teacher training, on NQTs being able to do the required amount of placements, and it's had a big impact. So what the Welsh Government have introduced this year, and it's very welcome, is an induction placement scheme for 2021, which effectively means that you will be guaranteed a placement for the first term of the academic year. We could have wished it was for the entire year, which would cover, all of the sessions that you would want to complete your QTS. But unfortunately, I think the Welsh Government decided that all they can afford is up until Christmas, but that's better than nothing. And so they have introduced this placement scheme, which will cover NQTs in Wales if it is needed up until Christmas. It may be that you have managed to successfully find yourself a place, but if not, this is something you need to seriously look at, because apart from everything else, it gets you the foot in the door. It gives you a term's work, paid work, at the appropriate rate at M1, and you should look at that seriously as an option if you haven't already done so. This is done through the EWC. I think the EWC have stated that they've invited expressions of interests. Students coming in will be matched to schools by the local authorities, and the terms work will count towards the 3 terms and the 380 sessions that you have to complete for your QTS. After that first term, though, future placements, future work is the responsibility of the NQT, so it would be your responsibility to find a job. But if you haven't already done so, this is a very, very welcome initiative from the Welsh Government, and it is entirely new. What happens during your induction? Well, during your induction, you'll be assigned to an induction mentor. And the induction mentor will set targets and approve your professional learning experiences. And the induction mentor is absolutely key. The induction mentor should be there to support you, to help you, but will also be there judging you as well, because they'll be observing your teaching and they'll be writing the report that will be used by the institution and the local authority to pass your QTS. So they're absolutely key people that you will need to work with as soon as you enter your schools. Now, what can you expect in your first year? Well, over your first year, you should have 8 days of professional learning experience in your first year. And that should include a 3-day national core programme, where probably run either by local authorities or by consortia, which will then fill you in on, pedagogical support, training, information, everything you need to know to work in Wales, I hope and trust. On top of that, there are supplementary 5 days can be chosen from a menu that will be provided by your local authority or your consortia. Now, NQTs must show that they've made progress against the professional standards at induction level. And the professional standards, they can be found, I'm sure you actually or should be aware of those and have worked with those and towards those as a teacher training student. But they also are key during your NQT time as well, because you need to show progress against those professional standards. And it will be the local authority that effectively will have the responsibility to pass or fail an NQT. But remember what I said about the importance of the induction mentor in that process. And there's no opportunity to resit the induction, but you may be able to extend the induction. That can happen if you're off sick for any period of time, or if you've been disadvantaged in any way. And that's very possible, of course, during these times, because there's been a lot of disruption, and there may be more disruption to come. Let's wait and see. Right, what do you need to do before you start? If you haven't already done so, you must register with the EWC, who'll set up your induction profile. They'll have, as I say, a lot to do with helping and supporting you during your induction year. You've got to ensure that you've got an up-to-date DBS, disclosure and barring service certificate. Those two things have just got to be done. You've got to be a member of the EWC, you've got to have a DBS certificate, so you've got to have those. Be aware of the induction arrangements, then be aware of the professional standards for the reasons that I've told you, and be aware of the professional learning passport, also held with the EWC. Now, PLPs are across the board in teaching in Wales. All teachers have access to having a PLP, but they are a requirement for NQTs. I think it's voluntary with other teachers, but they are a requirement for NQTs, and they'll be really useful and important for you as you build that induction profile. Right, a couple of points about us in terms of if you need help. Now, if you need help during your time during your NQT year, then really the first port of call is going to be with your induction mentor and with those who are there to help and support you within the school. But what if that doesn't work? What if there are wider, bigger problems that maybe you want to keep confidential from the school? Well, and on employment issues, of course, then you can come to us. when you get to your school, find out who your school rep is, the NASUWT rep in the school, or the school contact. If there isn't one in the school, and that is true of some schools, then see if you can find out, or you will be able to find out because you can contact us, who your local association secretary is. They will be a teacher. They'll work in your local area. They will know about your school. They'll know about your local authority. And they'll be very knowledgeable, and they'll be a good people to touch base with, to get some information or to get some help and support that you want to keep confidential, maybe from the school, and you just need some help and advice on that. Failing that, of course, and always available to you, is to contact us directly, and I've got the email address there for the Welsh Centre for the NASUWT. We do actually have two offices in Wales, one in Cardiff and one in St Asaph, one in the south and one in the north, so we can ensure that our service is consistent across the whole of the country. But that goes into our centre, and we will respond to that and give you what help and support that we can during your time as an NQT. Check out the information on the website as well, and if you want to follow us on social media, there's a QR code there for you to zap, and you can do so. I will make this PowerPoint available to you if you contact us through the website or through the email address that was just given. There will be a way of doing that, I hope and trust, so that you'll have that information to hand after this presentation. And we also have a student hub on the website, which are full of information, and a student guide, and that should, I hope, help you too. Right, I'm going to stop sharing there for the moment, and I've waffled on long enough there. I'm happy to take any questions. I can't promise to have instant access to the answers, but I'll certainly be writing those questions down or recording those questions, and we'll find a way of getting back to you with the answer to those. So if anyone has got any comments or questions that they wish to make, then if you can pop that in the chat box, I'll be happy to answer them at this time. So is anything anyone wants to say or a question on? Right, thank you. It's a good question there from Emma. Is the pension just an automatically? Yes, it is. When you go into teaching, you are automatically entered onto the teacher's pension. You can opt out, but can I advise you not to? I know some teachers early on in their career, when they need the money, and you're thinking, why do I have to kind of give over this much to teachers' pensions? But please remember that it's not just your money going into teachers' pensions. The employers give a whole chunk of money into your pension as well. And if you opt out, that is not going to happen. And even though I have to say, and I'm very long in the tooth with this, teachers' pensions ain't as good as they used to be, and I'm kind of like sounding very old there, they are still, it's a public sector pension, so it's still a good deal better than you'll get in a private pension. So yes, you're automatically entered, but you do have the option to opt out of it. Any other questions, please? At all? Doesn't have to be about NQT, QTS. It can be about teaching in Wales that you might want to know. Apologies, by the way, that as I say, shut my piece off. Apologies that the the PowerPoint is not bilingual. I've threw it together rather in the last minute. I'll try and make it bilingual for those of you who might want to have access to it in the Welsh version. I'll sort that out after this webinar. Anything else at all? No? Well, look, thank you very much for your attendance at this webinar. The very best of luck for your teaching in Wales. Remember what I said about the Welsh Government's programme for the first term. If you haven't got a placement yet, then remember you can get a right to having a placement in a school in Wales through that programme, and that would be really important and really useful because that's going to be a firm foot in the door to help you build your career in Wales. Good luck, and remember what I said, any problems, any issues, any help that you want, you just contact us and we will do our level best to try and help and support you. Okay, so you take care. Thank you very much and goodbye. Take care now.